So as you can see, we are on the final research paper info link in dashboard. So if you click that right here, you would get to this content, right? And the first item would be our sample of topics that we decided from the beginning of the semester. You were picking one, and that was basically your journey throughout this entire time. Uh, and I include a successful research paper from last semester. So if you click this open, you would need Microsoft Word to view it. But if you click it open, it gives you a successful example of the paper. So what I'm thinking about doing, for those of you who for whatever reason do not have word processing, I'm going to try to copy and paste the content in here, because now it's only a file. But what I'll show you is when you open it, it would look like this way. It would, and the heading would be done to scale, right? So you would put your last name here. You would put your first full name in the top left-hand corner. You would identify our course and section number, which would be 112. You would have the appropriate dates, 2020. Your word count can be indicated in the lower left-hand corner in the running head or the running tabulation of words. And then be sure to give your final research paper a title that indicates the trajectory of your argument. I should be able, after looking at the title, to see two things: what the focus of your document is, and which direction you're taking that focus. Right? So this is done to scale. And like we saw with the successful synthesis papers, what I've done is I've broken down the three main areas of discussion, and your thesis statement should be positioned as the final sentence of the introduction, right? So what I always said about structure, and I'm going to bring this up again, is you want to really give a thorough read to this area about structure, because when we did these analyses back in January and February, I told you to imagine 3 to 5 body paragraphs per thesis section, right? So this is an example introduction and thesis that was developed. It actually was from a student that developed it, but your introduction of your research paper should be of a similar length, and it should have as its capstone statement one sentence that articulates your 3 specific areas of discussion, right? So your first section of body paragraphs, and I would count 3 to 5 body paragraphs, and each one should be about 8 to 10 sentences or lines, whichever comes first. Those paragraphs should be connected, in this case, to your first thesis point. Say section 1 connects to your first thesis point, which is in this case about how physical suffering, prolonged physical suffering, would be alleviated if voluntary physician-assisted suicide were to be made a legal option for patients deemed terminally ill. Right? So that the first 3 to 5 body paragraphs of 8 to 10 sentences or lines would only approach from this standpoint, the physical standpoint. So imagine that you have a triangle. You're really triangulating this, and you're only at one angle with this first thesis point of physical. So the first 3 to 5 body paragraphs after your introduction and thesis statement would connect to that first thesis point. Section 2, the second section of the paper, the second section, the middle section of those 3 to 5 body paragraphs would connect to the emotional side, right? How in this example, if voluntary physician-assisted suicide were to be made a legal option for terminally ill patients, it would alleviate prolonged emotional suffering on the part of the patients themselves, their families and friends, and the healthcare workers, taking care of them, right? So that would be the potential focal point for that middle section, all about the emotional stuff. So that would be how you structure and design your paragraphs, 3 to 5 in total, 8 to 10 sentences or lines, whichever comes first. And then you move into the third section of body paragraphs, the third section, which would tackle it from the perspective of expense and monetary influence, right? How in the event that voluntary physician-assisted suicide were to be made a legal option for terminally ill patients, it would alleviate prolonged um, unnecessary expense on the part of the taxpayers, on the part of the board of directors at the hospital, on the part of the costs to buy equipment to keep a person alive who's religious or spiritual or personal beliefs do not want that to happen, right? That's why we have DNR orders, do not resuscitate. I mean, it's all current with all of the talk on healthcare. It's a not an ideal coinciding, but certainly a relevant focal point to refer to this example of how you can structure your own argument, right? So imagine if you just do the math on this, 3 to 5, 3 to 5, 3 to 5, that's 9 to 15 body paragraphs, 9 to 15 body paragraphs in the middle of your paper, sandwiched between your introduction and your conclusion. Your introduction would be about this big, give or take a few more sentences, but the final sentence of it would be that one capstone statement with your 3 areas of discussion clearly identified within it, right? So your conclusion would, in effect, restate the thesis, but also pivot into a new discussion point so your reader could conceivably pick up where you left off. So, that's the way that you want to remember structure, and that is definitely reflected in this sample document from a recent semester. And I would encourage you to definitely, look at the scale. It's written to scale in terms of the measurements, the margins, the formatting. You want to you will have a degree of creative license here with having subheadings like this. You can see what this student clearly did was have the yellow connect to the yellow, and then have the green in the second section connect to the green, and have the blue in the third section connect to the blue. And that's how they had their 3 to 5 body paragraphs spaced out. So, just another worthwhile couple of points to reinforce, just even in isolation. You can find suitable examples of how quotations are blended into the analysis. This is an interesting example. I like this one. NPR's article puts the spotlight on this viewpoint, featuring an interview with self-advocate Michael John Carley, who, when asked if he would accept a hypothetical cure for his autism, responds, "No, I love the way my brain works. I'm not changing anything." So the source is NPR, but NPR is quoting Carley, and the student wants to quote Carley. So this is an example of an indirect quotation. Later in this video, I'm going to talk to you about all of those what ifs and all of those scenarios. So just to go back into Blackboard, overall structure matters, how you design this. Another key point is the incorporating sources handout. Take a moment and open that. I'll do that as well. We open it up, and we should see that there are a handful of present tense power verbs. We obviously have worked from the bigger list in past weeks, and you can definitely go there as well because they have concrete definitions for each. But these are other, quick, often used verbs that get the job done. And you can see right off the bat that to acknowledge something is not necessarily the same as to reveal something. To question something is not necessarily the same as to suggest something. Words have meaning. words have purpose. And when you use these academic power verbs, you want to make sure that they're in present tense, but that they also, as accurately as possible, convey what your source is doing to the best of your ability. You want to be sure to have a concrete purpose for those words. I think the common thread here, the point that really bears repeating, anything other than talks about. Don't give me talks about, because when you give me talks about, that's not showing me that you're comprehending what the author is saying. You're simply stating that the author is doing it, but you want to show me what you're comprehending about what the author is doing. So that's a different mentality. That's a different approach that you want to take, right? So I want notes, I want wonders, I want implies, I want believes, because these are real specific words that show me that you are comprehending the particular passage that you are quoting. Okay, so just, specific examples of in-text evidence. When you, in your final research paper, when you introduce one of your four sources for the first time, this is a good technique to use. It's not the only technique, but it's a good technique. And it borrows from similar language and mechanics patterns that we've had in writing earlier in the semester, where you go in, insert article title here, and then you give me the author name, maybe even something about why they're credible, what their title is, and then a simple present tense verb followed by the quotation. So I'm going to maximize this for a second. And we can see that, in protecting freedom of expression at Harvard, note the presence of the comma. It's on the inside of the closed quotation mark of the title. Derek Bach, former dean of Harvard Law School, president of Harvard University, states. And then you have a comma after the verb states. Now, states can be fine. States can be fine if you are trying simply to tell me that, this is what the author is saying without trying to do anything else with it. If in your estimation, your interpretation of the author's quotation is that they're simply stating it without any purpose, any argument, any acknowledgement, any whatever, then that can work. But I do want some variability with the words. States, quote, the display of swastikas or Confederate flags clearly falls within the protection of the free speech clause of the First Amendment, end quote. The borrowed words are enclosed in quotation marks, and look at the placement of the punctuation. We did this when we did the sample sentences through the attendance and participation announcements, and I think we did that for Reflective Report 1 as well. You do not put the punctuation here on the inside of the closed quotation mark. You put it after the parenthetical reference. And we do not include Bach inside this parenthesis because Bach has been identified in the sentence, right? So these things matter when and this is a perfectly acceptable way of introducing a source. Now, in your research paper, if you are introducing your source for the first time, this is an acceptable method. But 3 sentences later, you don't have to give me the full title again of the source. You don't have to give me the author's first and last name again, because it's presumably still fresh in my mind, right? So even if it's like a sentence or two after, you can just do a quick reference to the author's last name, Bach, and that should be more than enough. Bach asserts that, quote, the display of swastikas or Confederate flags clearly falls within the protection of the free speech clause of the First Amendment. This is another acceptable way. Technically, I don't even have to have the introduction to the author's, title like this. This can be the first way that I meet Bach, if you so decide to do it that way, because I get the 639. You have Bach in the sentence. So with that Bach and with that 639, here's what I'm able to do. I can go at the end of your paper, I can go to the works cited page. And the works cited page is significant because you need to have one. and it needs to list your 4 sources on it. So I give a link at the bottom to a sample works cited page, and take a look at it, examine it, because this would be what should be at the end of your research paper with the 4 sources provided. And they should be in alphabetical order by the first letter of the source, right? So, that's, if I'm meeting Bach in a similar, in a way like this, if I'm meeting Bach by just seeing him in a sentence like this and I have no reference to him, then it's okay, because at the end of your paper, I should still be able, on your works cited page, to find Bach there listed. And if I wanted to consult the source, I should be able to find it with no issues, no complications, right? So to just get back into the incorporation of sources, spend time, definitely spend time reviewing the nuances of these, but it's kind of consistent with the quality of work that we've been doing already. In this example, what I like about it is it's the same quotation cited 3 separate ways, right? And there are 3 different ways of doing that. Now, in this example, beginning the sentence with he, that doesn't make sense if you haven't referenced Bach in the paper yet. So, that's something where, it's presumed that if you begin a sentence with he, that we know who Bach is in the previous sentence through any number of techniques, right? So this is a simple way of going about it, where I'm still able to equate or to connect he to Bach. So maybe you were speaking about Bach in a prior sentence. Maybe you referred to the title of the piece in a prior sentence, but you had to have put Bach in the text in some way, so that when you jump to he, me as your reader, I'm able to, or anybody who reads it would be able to connect Bach to that he. But that's why in this example, we don't have to put Bach here again, because the reader is still making the association. So again, punctuation after the parenthetical reference. These are all suitable techniques. Take time to refer to the rest of this document and review it carefully. This can be very helpful, I think. You can find this to be very helpful. So to go back into Blackboard for a second and to look at the other items in this list. Incorporating sources, research document specifics. Click that open, and when you do, you will see that it looks like this way. Boom. Okay, so read it, review it. Read all of the published text that's both in the syllabus and in shared files over Blackboard on the page that we're looking at. A couple of things to recall: all text between and including, that's important phrasing, the introduction and the conclusion should total at least 1,250 words and at most 1,500 words. I'll give you a grace period of 500 words on top of that. So basically 1,250 to 2,000. But your whole structure, everything that I say into, basically everything that I say into, is consistent with what we illuminate right here. So it's basically restating these central ideas of structure that we need you to reinforce, that we need you to remember and to implement. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, because we know that the body paragraphs, you're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a conclusion. It's going to be 9 to 15 body paragraphs of text, right? So let's just take the average on that. 9 plus 15 is what, 24 divided by 2, that's 12. So 12 body paragraphs on average, which would be 4 body paragraphs for each of your 3 sections of your thesis statement. So it would be within those three areas of discussion, those three sections of body paragraphs that you would quote freely from, and this is a typo on my part, from your four sources, being sure to make each quotation logical and necessary and adequately blended and correctly cited, right? And that's incredibly important. So there are specific guidelines for how, what I want to see at minimum for your quoted content. I want at least one and no more than two block quotations. Okay, so what is a block quotation? Well, let's take a quick look at this. If you go into MLA resources, you will have uh, um, actually, you know what? I think what I'm gonna do is go into straight up Google, and there are plenty of reputable examples, but the best one is going to be from Purdue Owl. So the purpose of a long quotation is when you are quoting text that is a minimum of 4 lines, or more, 4 or more lines. You want to block it off. That's why we say block. It's interchangeable with long. And you want to remove quotation marks around the content. You want to remove quotation marks around the content. So that basically means that you have blocked off the entire source's words like this way with no quotation marks. And specifically, you punctuate here before the parenthetical. Okay, so that's 4 or more, and use those sparingly. Use those when basically you think that you can't remove any words from the content, because the whole entirety of the quotation is too important and needs to be viewed as one collected whole. Nallie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him throughout her narration, right? So that's a student lead in. You would want to lead in to your content. You would want to set up or tee up like you're putting a golf ball on a tee, and you're about to whack it. But this would be your wording to lead in to the quotation, which would be the illustration of that point. So this is essential, and you want to follow exactly what the guidelines are. Place quotations in a freestanding block of text and omit quotation marks. Start the quotation on a new line with the entire quote indented a ½ inch from the left margin while maintaining double spacing. So this is manageable. What I'm going to do probably is provide another example or a quick link in the Blackboard page of links for the final research paper info. I think just having it there can be of use. But when it comes back to the purpose of how many of those I want you to include in the paper, that's important, because I have a cap on that, and I want you to not, overlook the importance of having that content adequately set up. So let me just make sure that you are seeing this. Okay, and I'm going through some extra measures here because the way that Zoom operates, there are some times when I pull up a document and it doesn't project into the video. So I'm going through extra measures just to make sure. Okay, so you should be able to see this now. 1 to 2 of those block quotations. That's I want to see those in your body paragraphs, not in each of the 3 sections. For the entire paper, for your 12 on average body paragraphs, I want to see at least 1 and at most 2 of block quotations from any of your 4 sources as you see fit. but 2 for the whole paper. Okay, 2 for the whole paper. In addition, I am requiring 2 to 4 direct and or indirect quotations. Now, the difference between those and block quotations is the length. When it's 4 or more, it's going to be formatted as a block quotation. But when it is below 4, I want it to be formatted no differently than what we've been doing in your synthesis papers or in your reflective reports or in your sample assignments, right? So if you have a question about what is a paraphrase, if you have the Siegel Handbook, definitely go to pages 110 and 112. We'll get to that in a second, though. But just a quick word about direct and indirect quotations. No different than what we've been doing. No different than what we've been doing. So just to kind of reiterate that, new share, we'll go back into Blackboard for a second. If you go to MLA resources, there are plenty of examples to choose from. But I think your best bet is, any of these examples are pretty straight up, where you incorporate borrowed words and you wedge it into a sentence. You have a sentence that mixes your words with the source's words in a sophisticated way, right? So remember that quotations cannot be stand-alone sentences. That's incredibly important. Quotations cannot be standalone sentences. You have to mix your words with the source's words in some meaningful way, even if there's a colon that leads into it, right? So I think I want to make sure that I'm giving you like the best information available. In the MLA resources link in dashboard, scroll to the bottom, and this is an incredibly important link. And I'm going to go through extreme measures just to make sure that you're seeing it. I believe you are, but I still want to just make sure that you're seeing it. I'm going to jump off of it for a second and then go back into new share, here, share. Okay, so you should be able to see this. What I just clicked into is incredibly important, because if you don't have the Siegel Handbook, you're not without hope. You have hope. You can still work through these points appropriately to make a solid research document. When it comes to creating in-text citations, because remember, what is it that I said? I said, I want in those 3 sections of body paragraphs from your 4 sources, I want 2 to 4 direct and or indirect quotations. That means it could be in any combination, right? At least you can go above it, but this is the bare minimum of what I want to see. So if you are creating in-text citations for your 4 sources, you want to be able to, and I'm gonna just make sure that we are seeing everything here. Okay, so you should be able to see this. I'm going through extreme measures just to make sure that you're seeing exactly what I need you to see. Okay, so we're back. In this resource, where it says a directory to MLA style for in-text documentation, each of your 4 sources will be one of these 17 things. Each of your 4 sources will be one of these 17 things. You need to find for each of your 4 sources the number that best describes the source that you're trying to cite in that particular moment. But all of these, number 1 through 17, are in the spirit of direct or indirect quotations. And there are some exceptions, but I think just scrolling down how it works, numbers 1 through 17, and then it gets into examples for in-text documentation. It walks you through multiple ways or scenarios of direct quotations. This is an example of a direct quotation. where, you know, Adams is said to have had, quote, the hands of a man accustomed to pruning his own trees, cutting his own hay, and splitting his own firewood. These words appear in the source that the student is quoting from, which is McCullough, page 18. Right? Right. So this is what I mean when I say a sentence needs to blend or mix your words with the source's words. That's what I mean by that. And that the blended text needs to, like, you know, follow along seamlessly with the preceding points. And then we have McCullough 18 reflecting the page number. So this is an example of a direct quotation. This is not the same as the 1 to 2 block quotations, because the quoted text is not 4 or more lines. When it's below 4 lines and it's directly being quoted, you would want to treat it as a direct quotation and have, you know, appropriate citation. So this is what I mean when I say direct quotation, direct. All right. So that it's very specific that you have the quotation marks around the borrowed text. Now, remember, though, that an indirect quotation is also a scenario here. So if you go back to the first page of this PDF, you will see, try to find the right number. Yeah, number 15, a source quoted in another source. We looked at this earlier. We've spoken about this earlier. That is an indirect quotation, a source quoted in another source, and it refers you to page 9. And we'll scroll down to page 9 for a second, and we'll look at number 15, and it gives us a quick walkthrough. When you are quoting text that you found quoted in another source, that's going to happen. One of your 4 sources might quote someone else, and you want to quote that someone else, right? So when that happens, look at the QTD, okay? The QTD, IN, and this would be, and then you would treat the rest of it as a typical in-text citation, where you have, if there's an author, the author's last name followed by the page number. So quoted in 10 or 7. Or if you're quoting, if your author or if your article is without an author name or an organization or whatever, you would still have to subject it to whichever one of the 17 best describes it. But you would have to then, if it's an indirect quotation on top of that, you would have to then use the QTD method to describe it. So it might be a situation where there isn't an author name, where it's the Centers for Disease Control, which is the author of the article, QTD.IN CDC report or something like that. With identifying information. MLA wants you to be as specific as possible with how that happens, right? So that's what I mean by an indirect quotation. So just to get back into the research document specifics, when I say 2 to 4 direct or indirect quotations minimum, I mean quotations like those in any number of combinations. It could be 1 direct and 3 indirect. It could be 2 indirect and 2 direct. And you can obviously go above that, but as long as I see a good representation of direct and indirect, as well as block quotations, that is good. Now we get into 1 to 3 paraphrased citations. What is a paraphrase, right? So let's go back into Blackboard, and I'm getting there myself. Bear with me. Okay, so you should be seeing what I'm seeing here. Let's go back into it over here. Oh, you see me. Okay, we're working on that. Okay, back into it. Okay, so okay, there we go. We're back into Blackboard, and I want you to go to final research paper info in the dashboard. And I want you to go to Purdue Al paraphrase, this item here. And I think it's also linked here, but I'll enter into it again just to be safe. When you click it open, okay, let me get that out of the way. Okay, paraphrase, write it in your own words. So it gives you a good walkthrough, and I suggest this being your go-to source. But the thing to remember about paraphrases, and I want at least 1 to 3 for the whole paper, it's your own rendition, I think is key wording there. It's your own rendition of essential information and ideas expressed by someone else, presented in a new form. The way to think about that is your author making a point that you do not consider to be common knowledge? If your author is making a point that you do not consider to be common knowledge, then it is not your original point. It is theirs. So even if you take that and word it in your own wording, you would still have to provide in-text citation using the techniques that we have highlighted in this example right here. And I just want to make sure that, again, you're seeing what I'm seeing. All of these examples with citation for in-text citations that we're using for direct or indirect quotations, these examples would still be used even with paraphrased information. The only difference would be that you would not include quotation marks around the text because you are putting it in your own words. But because you have considered it not to be common knowledge, and that's important because you've considered it not to be common knowledge, then you want to, in effect, provide ample source attribution in a proper way. So that's essential. So again, I'm just making sure that you're seeing what I'm seeing. Let's see, right? Screen, we're straight up. Okay, we're good. Okay, so that's how paraphrasing works. So this is a nice walkthrough of why paraphrasing is important, but a quick example of it would be something like this. The original passage would be students frequently overuse direct quotation in taking notes. And as a result, they overuse quotations in the final research paper. Probably only about 10% of your final manuscript should appear as directly quoted matter. Therefore, you should strive to limit the amount of exact transcribing of source materials while taking notes. That's the exact quotation. In research papers, students often quote excessively, failing to keep quoted material down to a desirable level. Since the problem usually originates during note-taking, it is essential to minimize the material recorded verbatim. Now, this is something the student considered. The student considered that this point was not common knowledge. So even though the student worded it in their own words, they still provided a parenthetical reference before the page number. No quotation marks were necessary. So that's important. You're effectively referring the student to Lester if they want to get further information about that, or if the student decides to disagree, or if the reader in general decides to disagree with this point, you are at least telling them that this is not of your own judgment. This is something that you have worded on your own, but it is based on your reading and it is based on your research. So it's still an idea that you did not originate. So you don't have to have quotation marks around it, but you do want to, cite it appropriately. You want to let the reader know that it's an idea that derived from someone else because you're thinking that it's not common knowledge. So paraphrasing can be typically the length of a direct or an indirect quotation below 4 lines. If anything is above 4 lines, you treat it as a block quotation. Typically, though, you're never going to paraphrase in block format. That's not going to happen. So these are the requirements that are coming together with regard for what I need you to create in this document. 1 to 3 minimum. You can go above that, but 1 to 3 minimum paraphrase information. So I need to see those bits as a baseline across your 3 sections of body paragraphs. I need to see those. And I need you to take full advantage of the MLA content or the resources that I've been showing you in this video, which have been here since day one, so that you're not without any sort of clue about how to do this, because I think you have the resources at your disposal. Now, I said 1,250 to 2,000 words tops. 75% of those should be your own wording. Okay, 75% should be your own wording. So I'm going to take my phone. I'm going to do some quick math with you. What's 75% of 2,000?
That would be 1,500.
So if you cap it at 2,000 words, at least 1,500 of those words would be yours. And the other 500 or so would be what show up in these quotations, right? So that's how you want to look at this. 3 parts you, 1 part research. Number 4, I do not want cover pages. I want you to use the essay heading format that we've seen. It also appears in your synthesis content area in the dashboard. So you have the format for the heading already designed. You just want to make sure that you have a title that tells me your topic and moves me in the right direction of that topic. All right, so getting back into it. Okay, so we've gone through incorporating resources. We have gone through research document specifics. We've gone through paraphrase. We have gone through the sample works cited page. The checklist, what I can say about that is that it's just a basic, you could be able to check the boxes and make sure that you have a final product that is doing exactly what I'm asking of you. So, a thesis statement, I think, is a probably important one. The most important item of the list: clear, explicit, and assertive. Put as the last sentence of your introduction. What have I said since day one? Write out of sequence. That's okay. Write out of sequence. Know your 3 areas of discussion. Crank out your body paragraph sections. Smooth them over, polish your mechanics, decide how you're going to insert or incorporate your 3 areas of discussion. Your 4 resources within those 3 areas of discussion, those 3 sections. And you will basically kind of arrive at how you can word a thesis statement that synchronizes with that content. And it should be able to fall in place pretty smoothly. I'd like you to underline it. That would help me. I think it kind of reinforces to you that it needs to have those certain pieces in it, those 3 areas of discussion that forecast what your body paragraphs will be doing. So your works cited page, again, pardon the typo, your 4 sources included, and this will be reflected on when I'll quickly put those documents back up with the number 4 so you're not confused. And that they reflect what we see in the sample research works cited page that I showed you earlier in this video, that they're in ABC order by the first letter of the source. Now, a quick, just another hint that you can take advantage of. If you go back into this resource, right? If you go back into this resource, you remember how I said that each of your 4 sources would be one of these 17 things? Well, that's cool, and that's in reference to the in-text citations that I'm going to need. But also remember your works cited page. So beginning on page 2 of the PDF, list of works cited, each of your 4 sources will be one of these 53 things. So for your works cited page, you have, if you're using articles from the RCBC's library databases, you can use the citation generator, but you should still be able to cross-check it against the format of these particular templates, right? So find the number that best describes the source for which you are creating a works cited entry, turn to the designated page and mimic the example. And you'll see that what ends up happening is it's all in sequence. Here it is, list of works cited, kicks off on page 11. It gives you templates for all of the what ifs, right? So you're able to refer to more than enough content to have a very suitable works cited page at your disposal. So just to get back into Blackboard for a second, actually, I want to go back to the checklist. Right here. Okay, so the works cited page, the thesis statement, the length, 4 sources, 2 to 4 short quotations comprised of indirect or direct, 1 to 2 block quotations, and 1 to 3 paraphrases, using all of the techniques that we've highlighted in the incorporating resources document. Okay, so this is it. This is the content. Now, what's going to happen is in the final research paper info, I'm going to provide a connection portal or a way to submit it right on this page. I'm not there yet, but also I'm going to keep adding the goals, 1 link per week in the dashboard, and I'll include it there as well. But it's going to be a similar submission process to your synthesis papers. You're going to click the box to weigh the document against the global reference database, and it will be evaluated. So this is, and I think, an essential video, and I'm going to link to it in this page only. I'll refer you to this page so you're not overwhelmed by content. Watch this video and pause, because I speak very fast. Pause with any questions or anything that comes up. Rewind, rewatch, rewind, rewatch, and just kind of process this at your own pace. I'm including a transcript to this video, which will probably be about 75 to 80% accurate, because I simply don't have the time to transcribe every video. But if you have any questions about any word or phrase or anything that I'm speaking here, email me right away. Let's talk. Okay, so that is it for this overview of the final research paper. And definitely keep the discussion going if you have any questions. Okay.